Hello, everyone. This is Kevin.
This is Kallin.
And this is Kaity, and you are listening to episode 4 of Hot Rods of the Sky. Hey everybody, and thanks so much for listening. Once again, we want to thank everyone for sharing our show and leaving some kind words and some awesome reviews. Thank you so much. Today's episode is actually going to cover something a little bit different. We might come back to the GB in later episodes, but in this episode, we are going to be talking about the Stearman Aircraft Corporation. So we'll go over a little brief history of the company, how it got started, where it went, and then we're actually going to go over the 3 Model 4 Stearmans that we restored over the last 40 years. So Dad, why don't you kick us off with basically what is the Stearman Aircraft Corporation and why should we care and all of that good stuff?
Well, Lloyd Stearman was a pretty prolific designer and of aircraft in the 20s and 30s and into the 40s. So he kind of got his start pretty early. I think around 25 or so when he was actually before that he was working for one of the other companies. I think right, Cal? Didn't he work at?
He was at Travel Air.
Well, before that even.
Oh, I don't know about
before that
Travel
he was
Air.
with Swallow and some of the other ones, and then he and Walter Beach and Clyde Cessna formed Travel Air, and I think that was around in early 25 when they did that. And the Travel Air biplanes are pretty well known, and those guys were working together to do that. Everybody was in the biplane business back then, and they then kind of, like a lot of partnerships, things kind of want to go their different ways. Everybody, 3 guys had different ideas of what they wanted to do, maybe the markets they wanted to pursue, or how they wanted to design and build airplanes. So they split up, and Cessna formed Cessna. Walter Beach formed Beach Aircraft Corporation, and Stearman did the Stearman Aircraft Corporation or Stearman Airplane Company. And that was, I guess, around 26 or so when he left. And then he was kind of going after the commercial market and commercial biplanes for doing mail routes and survey work, that type of stuff. And that was really where he was after. And so his airplanes, the C1, C2, C3, were the earliest designs. And the C3 had different variations of C3B, C3R, depending on how it was equipped, if it was a deluxe version or not. And then he the 4th design, he kind of dropped the C off the front and then went just with Model 4. And so the Model 4s, I think, were introduced in 29. Is that when it came about, Cal?
Yeah, the Jimmy Allen one was, I think it was October of 29, so it was one of the first ones that was a Model 4.
Yeah, it's like serial number 7, I think.
Yeah.
So they built about, from 29 to the early 30s, they built around 40 of these airplanes. And the Model 4 was kind of a downsized version of the M2 that preceded it. The M2 was a mail plane, and so these kind of got the name Junior Speed Mail. They were primarily designed and built for the mail routes, but you could have them in a passenger carrying version, which was 2 places in the front, a pilot in the back, open cockpit, pretty fast. The different versions of the C model had a Wright engine, the D model, a 985 Pratt Whitney, and the E model, a 1340 Pratt. So those are really about the same airplanes from the firewall back. Some of them were dolled up with cowlings and wheel pants, and some not. Some had different equipment in them for the different customers. If somebody wants heel brakes, they do that, or toe brakes. They had different systems. But for the most part, same basic airframe. And,
well, in terms of, like you mentioned, the Junior Speed Mail and all that stuff, and just made me think of, when did the oil companies start using the different airplanes and the speed mail stuff to really push sales? They had the Jimmy Allen, the radio show, and they sold toys just to, kind of boost marketing for their oil and gas stations. When did that start getting hot.
Yeah, that was right there in 29, 30 when they really started doing it. The oil companies, even today, they buy the best equipment that's out there to be able to promote themselves or move paperwork or execs back and forth. So they've had, even later, Walter Beach, that was his first customers with Stagger Wings were oil companies. They had the money. So quite a few oil companies had the Model 4s. Richfield Oil had the Jimmy Allen. Standard Oil had several divisions. There were Standard Oil of California, Standard Louisiana, Standard here, Standard there. And so there were several different of those organizations that actually had Model 4s. Standard Oil of California had 3 of them. And they were 783, 4, and 5 hotel, and they were the Model 4E specials. And Standard Oil Louisiana had one, and there were some others. Texaco had at least one, maybe 2. Painted up pretty.
And they would just travel the country and.
Some of it's promotional, going around promotional, but they might be moving, people around or taking the boss to down to another city or something like that too. The airplanes were fast for 1929. They were 130 miles an hour, so it was
it's early Bonanza speeds in 1920s and 30s. So it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
I looked up here just a second in our book. The original, there are 40 Model 4s, and it says they were scaled down and refined M2s, is what they called it. Let's see what we have this year. Original price tag was $12,500.
It's pretty big money in 29.
Yeah. Most of that's probably the engine.
That's pretty big money for me right now, anyway.
Yeah. So the different companies had them. Some of them were flying mail. So there were some that were painted up as had U.S. mail on them, and different companies had the contracts to different mail routes. So the CAM Air routes, civil air mail routes, and they would move mail. So it would hold about 700 pounds of mail in the front and the pilot in the back. And this is what we talked about before about painting the top wing a bright color so they could go find the airplanes if when and if they did crash. Just to go get the mail.
Yeah, that's grim. Yeah, the mail. Yeah, not the pilot. The mail.
As the story goes about this airplane, this was Lloyd Stearman's favorite design, and it was really the last one that he had involvement with before he sold his company to Boeing, which happened in, I don't know, I thought it was 31, but this says 29 here.
I think it's 29. Yeah. Who knows? Well, and that was one thing, Kallin, that I don't know. I'm sure you probably already knew it, but it was a few years ago that we were all on a family cruise, and Kallin and I took the great opportunity on the cruise. Instead of going by the pool or going to the sports deck, we huddled into our stateroom and watched a Boeing documentary for about 4 hours in one day. And they talked about the speed mails and Stearman and things like that. And that was kind of when I found out that Stearman was part of Boeing. And I never really I don't know why, I just never really put those two together.
Yeah, but
after Boeing bought them.
Yeah.
What's that?
I was going to say the same thing you were saying, the only after Boeing bought them.
Yeah, and they kept it as a Stearman airplane division of Boeing, or Stearman aircraft division of Boeing airplane, or however they did
Wichita, or they had some
it was
catchy
the Wichita
phrase.
Division. So, yeah.
Well, so let's jump into the first of the 3 Model 4s that you guys restored. And that was kind of an inaugural one for you guys, right? You mentioned that was the first restoration to kind of roll out of the hangar here in
where we are now,
what used to be Zellwood but is now Mount Dora.
Yeah, so going back to about 81, 82, shortly after we started restoring airplanes for the business, we had a pretty good association with Dolph Overton, who had the Wings and Wheels Museum that was in Santee, South Carolina, and then he moved it down to Orlando, had it at the Orlando International Airport. So he had a lot of really cool airplanes and, working on a collection and everything else. we did an airplane for him, a KR-21, and then he made a deal with a guy named Gene Frank out of Idaho that had a ton of airplanes, ton of old airplanes, and he was an old crop duster guy and ride hopper and pretty neat guy. And he actually had 2 of these Model 4 airplanes at basket cases. So, a basket case is just a pile of parts that you can, there's enough there to say you have an airplane, you've got the paperwork and all that, but doesn't look like an airplane. Most all of these Model 4 Stearmans had ended up at one crop duster outfit in California, Carberry Dusters. They had just about all of them. They really loved them, and it would haul a heck of a load, and they used them pretty extensively for the ag business in California. And Gene ended up with a couple of the carcasses from that, plus a bunch of parts. So Dolph Overton made a deal with Gene to restore one for him in exchange for the other one. So the 2 airplanes were the 774 Hotel airplane that we did, which is a Western Air Express one. It's now in the WAM Museum out in the Northwest. And then the other one was the 785 Hotel, number 5 of the Standard Oil of California fleet, one of the 4EXs. So those were the 2 airframes, and the decision was made to restore 774 in the Western Air Express colors, and that would be Gene's airplane. And then Dolph kept the other. So we had both projects here. Both those airplanes were here, and we actually started on those before we were at this facility, when we were still at another shop on another airport. And then brought it here, partially done, finished it here, and it was the first airplane to be completed and fly out of this shop.
Now, with a lot of the airplanes that get restored, there's a lot of research and just a cool story about the specific airplane itself. Is there any just cool story about this first one? I know there are with the other ones, but is there any rich
this particular one, Western Air Express later became TWA Airlines, so it was a forerunner to TWA. So it's kind of neat that that's the one that this one was modeled after. It actually was not that particular serial number. For some reason, when our crop dusters and in numbers get moved around and everything, this particular one by serial number was a different airplane, and then somehow it ended up with the registration number of 774 Hotel, so that's why we restored it in those colors, which turned out to be pretty cool because we finished the airplane. It had one of the old 1930s style snap cap 1340 Pratt Whitneys on it, 420 horsepower, the Wasp engine. And then Gene really, he's like, it's pretty cool and all, but I don't like it. It burns too much gas for ride hopping, and I can use my Kenner Bird or my 220 Bird to do the ride hopping and save a lot of money. So he didn't really want it, so he sold it to a local man here. Leroy Brown bought it, and he owned it for a couple years maybe, and then he sold it to Ron Rex. And Ron's the one that really owned the airplane for a long, long time. What was really kind of a cool little twist is Ron was a TWA captain, and so he was flying for TWA when he bought this airplane that's painted in the colors of the forerunner to the airline he was working for. So it kind of had a neat connection for him. And then Ron operated the airplane all over the place, and then we did an engine change on it to put take the 1340 off, the old original style 1340, which I think was the oldest flying Pratt Whitney operational engine at the time.
Yeah, I think so.
And then we put a World War II vintage 985 Pratt Whitney on it, 450 horsepower, constant speed prop, Kallin and all that, and made it look more like the 4D that it was.
What was the horsepower of the engine we took off the 1340? Because it
was 420 horse.
Okay, so same horsepower, just smaller package and constant speed propeller.
Correct, and the weight worked out about the same.
Yeah.
You take off the big engine that didn't have the constant speed, had a ground adjustable ham standard, and then you put on the smaller, lighter engine with the constant speed, and it was within like 50 pounds. So So it worked out pretty good.
That's good. It's a little more reliable too at the same time.
That was the main reason, was the reliability. He was, the original engine was using like a gallon of oil an hour, and it'd go every couple hundred hours. He's having to do a cylinder on it or something. So it was always a maintenance thing.
And you got to crawl up
so
there.
It just made it a little more user friendly.
Yeah, you got to crawl up there and grease the rockers all the time, and it's just a nightmare of an engine. Yeah,
open everything up, check the rocker, grease the rockers, do all that.
It was a
stuff.
pain. Imagine doing because he did those vintage airplane tours that they did. Did he do that with the 1340, or was that after?
It was after. Yeah.
Okay, so he wasn't worrying about
before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because he'd just be a pain.
Yeah. Just imagine though, you're doing a mail route, and you leave wherever, Kansas, and you're going west, and you get there and you got to grease everything before you can come back.
Yeah. Oh, do you have 2 gallons of oil I can borrow? Because I got no oil left. 2 gallons? You mean quarts? No.
Yeah. Yeah, they were pretty thirsty. So that was the first one, was the 774 Hotel. And I think that was serial number 4025, if I remember right.
So the second one was the standard oil with the huge wheel pants and red, white, and blue, the gold, the eagle on it, just very patriotic and super cool looking.
Yeah, but it turned out it wasn't the second airplane that we had that came along with 774. It wasn't that project. So about the time we finished the 774, Dolph sold the project that was a 785 Hotel, the standard oil airplane, and went out to a guy named Bob Hood, and then he later sold it to Alan Lopez, and it was restored by the Posey brothers up in Jersey area, and that one's now in the middle of the country somewhere, I think.
Is it Idaho or Nebraska or something like that?
I don't know, but
I don't know. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. So it's out there, but so the second one that we did was actually another project that we found, and I think it's what's the serial number? That was 36 or something. I don't know. Pretty late, and it was we were going to do that for a local guy here in Orlando.
Yeah, 36.
And it was 36, yeah. So almost one of the last ones made, and it was actually originally a mailplane version. So it originally had the big mail pit in it and everything. American Airways, I think, owned it at the time when it was new. But our customer wanted to do it up in the Standard Oil colors, and we knew that there was a Standard Oil number 5, which was that project that used to be at our place that Alan Lopez had restored, and then there's a number 4 was out in California, and that was Steve Hamilton did an airplane as number 4. So there's no one had number 3, so we decided to do it as the number 3 airplane. So there's a big Roman numeral 3 on the wings, Standard Oil number 3 on the cowling, that type of thing. So they had the 3 ships, and they were flying together and separately.
I was going to say, the one thing I do remember is that big red, white, and blue fuselage sitting in the hangar for a very, very long time. And that it took, how long did the whole thing take?
I don't know. There was a big long pause. We got the wings done, tail done, fuselage covered, and then Mike had to stop on it because that's about the time he got in an accident and wasn't really going to be flying anymore. So he just put it on hold, and then ended up selling it to the current owner, Todd Stewart. And so then we, as a project, and we finished the airplane for Todd. That's who owns it today. And it's
and who made the molds? Who made the molds for the Yeah,
I did. Yeah, what we did is that one we got a little bit smarter than when we did the GB. We Jeff and I hand carved the foam, and then we poured the concrete molds to make the GB wheel pants. And for this, by this time I had the ability, through a vendor that had a CNC router. Bill Shaneman actually routed out the wooden plugs that made the wheel pants. So we did those out of wood, and then finished them and made them pretty smooth, and then poured the concrete molds from there, and then turned them over, and then hammered the wheel pants. So we made 2 sets of wheel pants. At that time, we did the set for this airplane, and we did the set for 785 Hotel, the Alan Lopez airplane. That
well, and if you guys haven't seen, a Model 4 in person, or like haven't seen the size of these wheel pants, they are huge. When the molds are huge, they're probably still out behind the hangar. They're massive. You could fit, I can't think of another good example except for you could fit 2 or 3 bodies in there. They are huge, and it's one of those things that would fill up with water when it would rain because they'd be outside, and Kallin and I would just be gross and play in it and make mud pies and all that other nonsense. So they're like little duck swimming pools. They're like miniature ponds. These things are ginormous.
The wheel pants are 7 feet long and 3 feet tall, and about a foot wide. So they're pretty massive. And
yeah, you could fit three bodies in there probably.
if you cut them up,
right? Folded it up right. Yeah.
I'm sure we had
the weight.
I'm sure we had a bunch of people in the molds all at the same time hammering aluminum. At least 2 people in there at once.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Well, those little hand hammers, they just looked like little.
Yeah, it was an air hammer. It's called.
They're like the circular. The air. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we would use.
Just
right.
Yeah.
So the concrete molds, and then you take the aluminum and put it on the mold, hammer it in to get the shape. And then, so we had a left and a right mold half, and that made the 2 wheel pant halves, and then they got trimmed and fitted together, and then there was internal bulkheads and structures that riveted in, and then there's, in total, the welding to put the 2 halves together is 27 feet of weld on each wheel pant. So, as I said, we made 2 sets. We made the wheel pants, we made the brackets that mount it, we made all the cuffs and blisters that hid the brackets and blended it into the gear legs. We made all the streamlined bullets for around and the wing root fairings and everything for those airplanes.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but it's fun.
Some of the first stuff I did in the shop was hammer out some of these little pieces that are on this thing, the air scoops and little blisters around the wires and all this kind of stuff that I did before I was old enough to get paid.
Well, one of the first things I did in the shop was I was shoved in a corner and told to count all of the washers. And it was a very important job that I needed to be quiet while
Still
doing.
Is an important job.
So, yeah, it's still.
and you.
I'm not doing it anymore.
And you still aren't quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well.
But yeah, so we made all that stuff for this airplane, and then so that was the second one. It's pretty nice. It's a pretty deluxe airplane. Full NACA cowl.
Well, you got the gold on there, right?
It's got a gold
That's
leaf on the side.
Yeah, the gold leaf was really cool.
With the Stenavo, Standard Aviation bird, their logo on the side. That's what that is.
And then it says Standard Oil of California.
I thought it was an eagle.
It's a bird, yeah.
Not an eagle. Oh, it's a bird.
It's kind of an airplane morph bird sort of thing. Yeah, it's got wheels, so it's not completely a bird. But it's and then
now another
the logo, gold leaf logo on the side of the cowling, Standard Oil of California, number 3.
One now the next one, the third one is probably definitely my favorite, just because I can't shut up about it. I think when we started talking about this podcast, I wanted to talk about it, and I just think it's really cool. And that's the Jimmy Allen Junior Speed Mail for East Stearman. Now, how did that come to us, and how did we figure out it was cool?
Well, when we did the airplane 488 whiskey, we started from Mike Danforth. He actually purchased 2 projects, 2 sets of paperwork, 2 fuselages, 2 sets of wing parts, that kind of thing. So two basket cases, and we restored one, and he had the second one, and the original idea was to maybe do the second one as the Texaco oil airplane, which there's a lot of little banks. A lot of people have the little biplane red bank, red and white Texaco. So he was kind of thinking to do that, but then with everything that changed, and he didn't keep going with airplane stuff as much. It was in storage and he had it for sale. So it sold to another individual who was going to restore it, and then he went in a different direction on warbirds and things. And about that time is when they started doing the air tour with the vintage airplanes going around the country and just kind of replaying that whole thing. And one of the participants in that program was Sarah Wilson. She was flying her PT-17 Stearman around and giving rides, and really a go-getter in aviation, trying to promote it with everyone. And so she got a ride in one of the Model 4s that was on the trip. I don't know which one. It could have been Addison's or the Western Air airplane. And she's like, I want one of these. Where can I find one? And then turns out it was sitting in the rafters at our place 50 miles from where she lives. She was living in Lakeland at the time. So she made a deal to buy that project and then contracted with us to restore it for her. And in doing so, with the information that she had, discovered that it was the Jimmy Allen airplane in his past life. And she went after all that Jimmy Allen stuff, figured out everything about it, and really tried to bring the whole Jimmy Allen Flying Club back to life again and use the airplane to promote aviation and get youngsters involved. And then she did that for a couple of years, and then she sold the airplane after that.
Well, and I think I don't know, I just think the little radio show that they did with it was just adorable is probably an insulting way to describe it, but I think it's great. And we'll play a little snippet of it for you guys, but it's the Air Adventures of Jimmy Allen. So, it's radio show, and then they would take the Jimmy Allen Model 4 and they would tour around, and Jimmy Allen wasn't actually flying in it. You had the pilot and then the actor up front, but he would come around and talk to the kids and all that other stuff for is it Richfield Oil?
Yeah, Richfield Oil.
Right?
So, but
yeah.
Jimmy Allen, the character, was a boy. And so, he was a boy that was solving all these mysteries or whatever was going on. And so then they had the chief of staff guy, or whatever they call it, corporate pilot, who was actually flying the airplane when they would go on the promotion. So, and most people didn't realize that the pilot sat in the back and the passenger sat in the front. They just figured, like a car, you're driving it from the front seat.
Yeah.
So it made perfect sense, and they just kind of went around. They would promote it. But Dudley Steele was the pilot for Richfield that was flying the airplane around.
When they
So it had his name on the
show,
side with some kind of title,
When they got the airplane, I remember when we were doing it for Sarah, and she was doing all this research and Jimmy Allen stuff. I remember one of the stories she told me that she'd found was when they bought the airplane or left Wichita with the airplane, and Dudley was flying it to Los Angeles, where Richfield is. When he landed in Richfield, or in Los Angeles, that's when he found out the Great Depression had just started, and he was in the air when all that happened. He had no idea anything was going on until he got back to Los Angeles.
As part of it, you got to think about the era that this was. The country was, really going great, and then, went over the cliff financially, and so many of these airplane companies didn't survive. There were, dozens and dozens of airplane companies out there that didn't make it. Stearman and Cessna.
Well, and that's what I find
so survived.
And that's what I find so interesting and crazy at the same time, is you have this golden age of aviation. And for me, it's always been two separate things. Like, I know that the Great Depression existed, and I have the years, the year range, but then you think of the golden age of aviation, and you've got, Lindbergh and the GBs, and you have all this awesome stuff. And I don't usually equate them with happening at around the same time. I just knew it was late 20s all the way up until right before World War II. Everybody was too busy to be doing anything else. But, that's some of the worst economic times for the entire country and all of history. And I don't know. In my mind, I never really put those two together. How something, during such a horrible span in our country's history, financially wise, just some really awesome things came out of it. in terms of aviation.
Yeah, there was a lot of pioneering going on during that era too, and that's a lot of growth in design and things. But what was really kind of making it go, and the reason it survived, was the guys concentrating on this commercial aspect of it. The oil companies, the airplane companies, going after the clients who had the money. These are oil companies we talked about with the Granville stuff. The ice cream, magnates, and then you've got some of the racers are sponsored by Guggenheims and different names like that. So it was pretty fancy stuff that wealthy people could afford. And as the barnstormers were using Old War I stuff to go around and try to stir up the interest in aviation, make some money, kind of a carny lifestyle, that's about the only exposure that the average citizen had to any aviation. It wasn't common today. I mean, you were going to get on a train and go someplace. You weren't going to get on a bus and go someplace. That's how you traveled, was by train or walking, horse. But it wasn't airplanes for sure.
Well, so out of the 3 that you restored, Dad, which one is your favorite and why?
Oh, I don't know.
You got to answer now.
I mean, Jimmy Allen airplane is definitely cool, but to me, it's the one done up as Standard Oil, just because of all the sheet metal work that I did that's on it, the wheel pants and all the cuffs. It's pretty fancy looking. It's definitely a deluxe version of the airplane compared to, it doesn't look like utilitarian kind of a deal. So I would say it's probably the favorite of the 3. Even though, I was 17 years old when we did the Western Air Express one, so that one was some of my earliest work.
Well, how about you, Kallin? Which one's your favorite? And you can't pick the same one Dad did or the same one I did. So, looks like you're stuck with one.
Stuck with the one that I've never worked on. That doesn't seem fair. I don't know.
All right, fine. You can copy them.
I don't know. I kind of have ties to both of them because, the Standard Oil of California airplane was the first airplane that I worked on and got paid to work on. I was summer between school and helped get it all prepped and ready to go for its trip to Oshkosh and all that, and it was the first thing I did, and then all the stuff I got to make on it over the years. But the Jimmy Allen airplane, the Richfield Oil airplane, I was the first one to start that airplane when we finished it, and first one to taxi it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
When she did all the photo shoot stuff, I taxied it around for her to move around. So it's kind of neat. But I mean, now I think I like the Standard Oil California airplane because I've actually flown that airplane. So I haven't flown the other ones.
Really? When?
Beginning of January. What? Flew it with.
What? That's
insane. It's Sebring. So.
Huh.
It's I can see now why Sarah getting a ride in one, and I gotta have one of these because I fly a PT-17 and why would anyone want to fly a PT-17 over any one of these ever? Because it's an amazing airplane for how big it is. It's incredibly powerful and it's very capable of an airplane.
Yeah, and it cruises around. It feels like a large motor car. It's like riding in a Rolls or an old Duesenberg. It's got that.
Yeah, I was gonna say like a luxury.
Yeah, exactly. It's a luxury motor car.
Smooth.
Yeah. Super heavy.
Whereas
that's cool.
The PT-17s were built for training guys in the war and teaching them, making it hard to fly so they would learn how to take care of things and then be able to fly more complex airplanes. So it had a different purpose. They just built a crap ton of them, and that's why there's so many out there. And they're in their third. The PT-17s are in their third life now. They originally for the military, then it became crop dusters because they were cheap after the war, and now everybody restores them back and undoes all the crop duster stuff, and it's back to what it's supposed to be.
It's amazing when I got to fly it with Al and take off, and you never get to full power because it has so much power because it's designed to be super, super heavy and have a bunch of mail and a bunch of stuff. So it has plenty of power, and you just levitate off the ground because it's amazing. And you don't really get knocked around because the airplane weighs 3,000 pounds. So it's heavy and has a huge wing, so it really gets off the ground faster than I anticipated it would. It's pretty amazing. It's incredible how short in and out of the field you can get with that thing.
But at the same time, it's not aerobatic. Like
no,
what most people think of a Stearman.
That was going to be my next question. I'm like,
sure.
so... Yeah.
So it's one of those airplanes that it's got a very large top wing, a smaller bottom wing, so it's good and stable going cross country, and it was designed to go from point A to point B at a reasonable speed. So it's a contemporary to airplanes like the Lockheed Vega, other airplanes of that era that were doing the same job, getting from A to B. That's what it was designed for. So it's a different job than teaching combat pilots how to fly and dogfight and everything.
And I could see hopping in one of these things and going around the country and doing the tour and stuff and having no problem going, from here to Los Angeles, because it's a very comfortable and it's fast, and it has 100-something gallons, so you got pretty good long legs on it. If you didn't run out of oil first originally, but it's pretty amazing.
Well, that's why they had 15-gallon oil tanks, so you could run for a while and not run out of oil.
Isn't there, or at least at Sun and Fun, isn't there a Model 4 that does rides that you can just pay $20 and they'll take you up, or is that a different
airplane?
What is that?
That was a new standard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a new standard. So
my bad.
Yeah, that's an airplane that was designed in the 1920s specifically for ride hopping. That's its purpose. It wasn't like it was used for something else, and then we can haul people with it. But it's actually 4 passengers up front, 2 and 2, and then the pilot in the back. And a friend of ours, Rob Locke, has a couple of those that he was running a ride hopping business for a long time. And there's, I think, 2 other ones that are flying around. I think there's one maybe Rhinebeck and someplace else.
Well, you had the
ride hopping.
The one that Rob has, his dad had one. They were sister ships.
Right.
And then you had the one that...
the green one.
Oh, I just totally forgot the name of the guy that used to had the Pepsi airplane at Sun and Fun doing the smoke.
Oliver.
Oliver, they had one there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since Kallin was describing such an amazing experience of a ride in a Model 4, I was trying to find a way that literally anybody could go get one, but... Sorry, folks. I guess make friends with a person with a Model 4. I don't know.
Yeah. There's not that.
And that would not be us. We don't have one. We don't have one.
Well,
I think there's 10 of these, roughly 10 of them that are out there that are airworthy out of the 40 that were built.
And there's
a few more that exist.
Restoring 30%. So restoring 30% of the Model 4s in flight's not too shabby of a brag.
Yeah, I mean. We had an opportunity to do 3 of the original airplanes, so it's pretty cool.
What were you going to say, Cal?
I don't remember now. I lost train of thought.
Yeah, so I would think it would be kind of neat. There's a couple of places in the country where there's a bunch of Model 4s, and right now in the Northwest, they've kind of gathered up there. The Jimmy Allen airplane is in Lewiston, Idaho now. The Western Air Express one that we did is in at the Wham Museum in near Hood River, Oregon area, and it's Western Automobile and Aviation
Museum,
something
I think.
like that.
Yeah.
So they have that one out there, and they have the M2 out there, the Big Brother. And they have one of the prototype Stearmans, one of the early PT-17 style airplanes. So they got some pretty cool airplanes out there. And then there's the Pembertons have theirs, and Jeff Hamilton has one out there. Then there's another one in California that's Steve Hamilton. So there's a lot of them are out west, and this is the only the Standard Oil number 3 that's down here is the only one that's in the southeast United States.
The other ones that. You got Addison's airplane. What's the black and yellow airplane? Ben Scott. Those there's like 3 or 4 that do the mail run stuff that they every few years they recreate hauling mail from one place to another, and they just did it I think last year. I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and Todd and Freddie did that with this one. They hauled some mail on a route, and we got a letter that was hauled in the airplane that we built. That's pretty cool. Thank
you guys so much for hanging out with us and listening to us babble about some Model 4 Stearmans that we've done and a little bit of Stearman history. If you like this episode and you like this show, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you're listening to it on a podcast app. If you're listening to it on YouTube or Facebook, just throw it a like. Not a whole lot of work for you guys to do. And yeah, have a great night or day, and thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for coming. Have a good night, evening, day, whatever.
And we're going to leave you at the end of this episode with a little snippet from the Air Adventures of Jimmy Allen. So enjoy this adorable radio show, and we'll see you guys next week.
The Air Adventures of Jimmy Allen. Jimmy Allen's Air Adventures. Jimmy has been hoping against hope he will be accepted by the Monsoon Company to fly their entry in the annual transcontinental race for the Vanderpool Trophy. Speed Robertson, famed airmail and racing pilot, recommended his chum to the Monsoon officials. They replied, asking Jimmy to report at once to their factory, prepared to fly the Monsoon 800 in the race. With a few words of encouragement from Speed, the young pilot hurried east to take his first big flying assignment. Now we find ourselves in the office of Mr. E.J. Thompson, president of the Monsoon Aircraft Engine Company. He has just called for his chief engineer, Bill Whitehead, designer of the Monsoon 800.
Come in.
You sent for me, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, Bill, I did. Have a chair.
Yes, sir.
Well, how's our race job coming along?
Oh, it's all set, Chief. Our boys have checked over everything, and all we need now is a pilot to fly it.
How's the engine turn up, Bill?
Oh, it's great. Shows 1,800 on the box, and with the prop set the way it is, we wouldn't want anything better.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. We're right up against the deadline anyway. Because we're not giving our pilot much time to run any tests he might consider necessary.
We've given this engine every possible test that I ever heard of, Chief. We've ran it on the blocks for 500 hours without stopping. We've checked it with all kinds of fuel, run it in cold temperatures and scorching hot weather.
I know that, Bill. It's the strongest piece of machinery that has ever hung in an airplane.
Yes, and it has power, too, E.J. Well, look at that dynamometer test we made. I'll bet in all of your experience in engine building, you never saw such power developed for the weight.
Yeah, you're right. It has power. Worlds of power. And believe me, that's what it takes in these modern racing planes. The most conservative estimate which we have made public shows 800 horsepower.
You're too modest, Chief. I always said that. Now, say, this Monsoon, when she's winding up around 2,400 and with that supercharger in her, well, she's kicking up so close to 1,000 horsepower that it just isn't funny.
Bill, that's the sweetest music I ever listened to. Those 18 cylinders barking out a symphony of thundering power. I'll tell you, there's nothing like it in the world.
That's right. You can't beat it.
No, here I am going all somewhere on a tangent. Let's get down to business. We haven't much time. You're perfectly satisfied with the job, are you, Bill?
I really am, Chief, yes. Bring on your pilot.
Fine. Our pilot will be here in a minute. He just arrived in town and phoned me. He's on his way out here now.
Well, sir, we'll turn over a great airplane to him and a wonderful engine. I don't think there'd be anything in that race that can touch it, Chief.
Well, I hope you're right, Bill. But I'm wondering.
You mean about the ship?
Yeah. I'm wondering if it is the fastest job in that race.
What makes you say that, Chief?
Well, there are 12 entries in that race, including our own. 11 without us. Well, that 11, there are 9 that don't bother me at all. Some good ships, yeah, some good engines. And they'll be flown by crack pilots. But they're not in the same class with our job.
I agree with you there, E.J. We've just too much speed and power for them.
But there are two airplanes in this race, Bill, that I am worried about. I don't mind telling you that I've had a few sleepless nights thinking about those two ships.
Yeah, I guess I know the two you mean, all right. Speed Robertson's Bluebird Special and the Mercury Mystery Ship.
I guess you've been thinking a little about them, too, eh?
Well, Chief, it'd be okay with me if they weren't in the race, I can tell you that.
Well, I don't feel that way about it, Bill. Naturally, I want our ship to win. It's got to win. But we don't want an empty victory. We want to beat the best in the country.
And you're wondering if our job is the best, huh?
Speed Robertson is a brand new ship with lots of power. And anything Speed has is going to be fast. Very fast. And he's the greatest racing pilot that ever slipped on a pair of goggles. I wish we had him.
There's no getting around that, E.J. It's my opinion that if we can beat Speed, we'll win this race.
Well, I'm not so sure. Don't underrate this mystery ship.
I haven't been able to get much dope on it.
Well, the Mercury people have developed a new engine similar to ours. They'll have it in this new ship of theirs. And, Bill, they'll move heaven and earth to win.
Chief, I've spent 2 years developing this new engine of ours, and the Monsoon Company has a lot of money invested in it. It's the greatest aircraft motor in the world today.
I know, Bill. I believe every word you say. You've done a remarkable piece of work. I don't think the Mercury Company can build the same quality of engine you do. They just don't put the care and workmanship into their product. Their engines don't stand up like ours. The records prove that. But, Bill, they have some smart men in that company and a lot of money back of it. And as I just told you, they'll leave no stone unturned to win the Vanderpool Cup.
Mm-hmm. They're a tricky bunch, too. You know that as well as I.
Bill, I'm going to tell you something in the strictest confidence. It's something I learned just recently, but I kept it to myself. Because I didn't want to bother you with business matters while you were busy working on the ship.
Well, go ahead, Chief. Anything you tell me won't go any further.
It's of the utmost importance that our monsoon engine wins the Vanderpool Trophy. And I'll tell you why. The officials of National Airways are going to place an order for 500 new aircraft engines.
Yeah?
They must do this to meet the faster airmail schedules required by the government. And they're waiting to see what engine stands up under the grueling test of the transcontinental race.
Well, you mean the engine that comes in first will be the engine they buy?
That's exactly what it amounts to. The engine that brings victory to the manufacturer will also bring it an order for enough engines to keep its plant busy for 2 years.
Well, George, Chief, that really means something.
Well, that isn't all. You realize, of course, how business has been the last couple of years.
There just hasn't been any.
It's cost us a lot of money to develop this Monsoon 800. And, Bill, if we don't get that airline order, well, we'll just have to close our doors.
Is it really that bad?
I'm sorry, Bill, but it is. There's no use closing our eyes to the situation.
Well, I can see only one answer to that, Chief. Our pilot absolutely has to win the Vanderpool Cup.
It's a tough spot for this young Allen. In fact, the situation is so grave, I don't want him to know all the facts. It might affect his flying. He gets to worrying about it.
But is he the pilot for us, E.J.? You know, it seems to me that in a situation as critical as this, we ought to have an older man. Oh, a pilot with more experience. After all, this Jimmy Allen is just a kid with little or no racing experience that I know of.
I realize that. To be quite frank, I know very little about him myself. When we couldn't get Speed Robertson, I asked him to recommend a pilot who could get every last foot of speed out of our ship. And he wired back that he considered Allen capable of handling the job.
Speed Robertson ought to know. If he says a pilot will give us his very best. Well, say, Chief, you don't suppose... well, what I mean is that Speed Robertson is out to win this race himself.
I know what you're getting at, Bill. Well, don't ever think that. Speed Robertson is as fine and true a friend as I've ever had. And he's honest and sincere. A square shooter there ever was one. If he says Jimmy Allen can do the job, well, that's good enough for me.
I hope he's right. But say, who's flying this Mercury mystery ship?
Well, now there's something that worries me. I understand they've hired Wings Wagner to fly it.
Wings Wagner? He nearly beat out Speed Robertson in the race last year, didn't he?
Right. Wagner's a good pilot. In fact, Speed Robertson's the only man that ever could beat him.
I'll say he's a good pilot. Nobody ever questioned that.
Yeah, but that isn't all, Bill. I don't like Wagner. Never have. I don't like that shifty look in his eyes. And there's another thing I don't like about him.
What's that, E.J.?
I don't like the idea of his flying that mystery ship. Wagner will do anything to win a race.
And the Mercury crowd wouldn't ask any questions either.
It's a bad combination. They want to win the race the worst way. And believe me, Wings will just soon win it the worst way as the right way.
Well, I'll tell you right now that whoever wins this race will know he's been through a battle.
Yeah, and Speed Robertson had better keep his eyes open, because Wagner's out to get him this year.
What does he have against Speed, Chief? I mean, outside of being beaten by him.
Speed caught him in some crooked work in the race last year and threatened to give him a good thrashing if he ever caught him pulling any phony stuff again.
Yeah, and he'd do it, too.
Oh? Yeah, Thompson speaking. Oh, yeah, send him right in, please. Well, here's young Allen now. We'll have a chance to see what he looks like.
How do you do, sir? Are you Mr. Thompson?
Yes, yes. You must be Jimmy Allen. Well, I'm glad to have you here, Allen. Let me introduce our chief engineer, Bill Whitehead.
I'm glad to meet you, Mr. Whitehead.
I'm glad to know you, Al.
Take this chair here, Allen.
Thank you, sir.
We don't have much time to visit, but I guess you're rather anxious to get a look at the ship.
Yes, Mr. Thompson, I am. From what Speed Robertson tells me, it's a wonderful airplane with a powerful new engine you people have developed.
We think we have a good ship. And we hope we found a good pilot.
Mr. Thompson, I'm anxious to fly your ship in the Vanderpool Cup race. In fact, I've never wanted anything more in my life. But on the other hand, I'm a stranger to you. And I want you to understand that I don't consider myself in the same class as Speed Robertson and some of those other racing pilots. I haven't had the experience they've had.
You mean that you feel a little hesitant about flying our ship?
No, sir, I don't mean that. I can fly the job, and I'll get everything out of it as possible. But I don't want you to be under the impression that I'm, well, an old hand at this game.
Well, we understand from Mr. Robertson that your experience in racing has been limited.
Alan, have you had much time on high-powered racing ships?
No, I haven't, Mr. Whitehead. Speed Robertson taught me to fly and showed me how to navigate. He let me put in a few hours on his new Bluebird racer.
This is a tough race, Alan. You're up against the best pilots in the country and the fastest airplanes. Your inability to fly in a little bad weather or a small error in navigation might cost you the race.
I realize that, sir. But the same holds true for the other pilots.
We confidently believe that we have the best job that'll go to the starting line. Our engine is rugged and has a world of power, and monsoon engines have always been famed for their reliability. Mr. Allen, we want you to fly a fair and square race, but the Monsoon 800 has got to win.
Mr. Thompson, I can't make any promises about winning a race. Too many things can happen between the start and the finish. But I can promise you two things. I'll work day and night and give you everything I have.
Well, that's all anyone can expect. And what's the other promise?
That I'll fly a fair and square race. If I can't win that way, I don't want to win at all.
Well, that's the way I like to hear you talk. It's a bargain. Now, I want you to go out and look over the ship. You'll find Rags Johnson, your mechanic, working on it now. They'll have one of the boys taking Allen out the ship.
Okay, Chief.
Thanks, Mr. Thompson.
Harry, show Mr. Allen here out to a race job, will you?
Yes, sir.
What do you think of our young pilot, Bill?
I like that kid. I like the way he looks you straight in the eye. Chief, I'm putting my money on Jimmy Allen to come through. Well, it looks as though Jimmy has taken on a man-sized job. Can he handle the powerful Monsoon 800 racing ship? Join us in the next air adventure of Jimmy Allen.
This program has come to you through the facilities of the World Broadcasting System.